Hey, this is Monique. This time on One Mo Project, I'm going to show you how I made a really simple drawstring backpack diaper bag and a change pad for my niece Sarah. Now, Sarah's not my niece in the traditional sense. Her father is my husband's cousin, so that makes her mom my sister. Therefore, Sarah's my niece, right? Yeah, we're going to go with that. All right, here's how I made it. So I started with two pieces of fabric that were 36 by 15 and a piece of fleece, the polar fleece that was the same size. Now I'm going to pin them right sides together. And while polar fleece, it's kind of hard to tell. If you look at it, you may prefer one side over the other. Some of them matter more than others. Anyway, when I pin it, I always want to pin perpendicular because I don't want to get too close to the pin and not be able to get it out because it's parallel to the seam. So I always pin perpendicular, but then I try not to sew over them if I can avoid it. Here at one end, I'm going to back stitch just a little, kind of maybe 2 inches off the middle, and sew to the corner. And when I get there, I'm going to leave my needle down, pick up my presser foot, spin my fabric around, and then sew again. But instead of sewing at the same seam allowance, I'm going to sew right there along the edge of the print because the airplanes don't print all the way to the edge, so I didn't want to have a weird stripe where the airplanes just aren't there. That'd be terrible. So anyway, sew all the way around back to the first side. So sew the other 3 sides straight across. The same thing though at every corner. Stop at the corner, leave the needle down, pick up the presser foot, keep going all the way around. But then when I get all the way back to the first side, the side where I started, I'm not going to sew all the way across. I'm going to leave about a 4-inch opening and then back stitch again so that I can turn this to the right side. Now I'm going to trim the seam allowance some on the side that was the salvage edge that was so big, but also it's important to miter the corners. See here, you can see the seam and cut diagonally there and get rid of all of that extra bulk so that once the seam allowance is on the inside, it's not such a bulky corner. You can make it laid down just a little better. Now I'm going to run my hand all the way up inside to the farthest corner, even though the two of them are the same distance from the opening, but the farthest corner I can, and then use my fingers to turn it most of the way out. But then I'm going to use my handy dandy chopstick to poke the corners the rest of the way out. Now if you ever use a bamboo skewer, don't use that pointy end. It's too sharp and you'll just stab it all the way through the fabric, and sometimes that makes it worse instead of better. So something that's not quite so pointy is better. But if you don't have a handy dandy chopstick, go eat some Japanese food, or you can use a bamboo skewer. Just use the blunt end instead of the sharp end. Then I'm gonna pin the opening closed before I top stitch around. Now if this was a cotton fabric, I would iron it all first before I did this top stitching, but because this is synthetic fabric, the light blue with the airplanes is some waterproof fabric, and then it's polar fleece, which really can't take a whole lot of heat. So instead of trying to iron them and risk melting them, I'm just going to work that seam allowance out as I go. It kind of wants to roll in on itself, so that's no good. So I'm going to work it out as I go. Same thing here at the corners. When you get to the corner, leave the needle down, pick up the presser foot and turn, and that way you don't get some weird long threads there. It stays in place. And then I worked the seam allowance out as I went in, I don't know, 6 or 8 inch sections, and sewed all the way around all 4 sides. About, I don't know, a 1/4 inch seam allowance or something not too big, but I wasn't trying to sew all the way at the edge. And at the back at the opening where I turned it from, it won't matter that it's a little bit open there, as long as you catch the seam allowance on the inside. Okay, so once I get all the way around though, this has the ability for the polar fleece to slip around on the other fabric. So I kind of want to quilt it. Now when you quilt, there's the piecing that you do to make the top. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about when you sew all the layers together. And here, I don't know why I didn't measure. You know, it's not like there wasn't a yardstick. You can see like 2 or 3 of them, and a tape measure just within reach, but I didn't measure. But what I do want to show you is how, instead of trying to measure though, even though I should have measured before I folded it, I put pins in there so that I could sew between the pins to keep that straight line across. And then the same thing on the other side. Instead of trying to, I could have drawn on it. There's some tailor's chalk laying right there too. No, this is the way I chose to do it. Anyway, I put those pins in there using the folded, the edge from where I folded it to keep it in a straight line. And that worked well to make these quilted areas across. But then I wanted to go the long way. So I did that one a different way. Look at that. I found the elusive tape measure that was just off camera and pinned it. It's about 15 inches wide, so pinned it at the 5 and the 10 inch place. But because this has stripes on it, I just used the stripes. Instead of going down and measuring and marking all the pins, I just used the stripes to help keep it straight all the way down the long way that's 30 something inches. So if you didn't have stripes, you would have to mark it somehow, but I had stripes, so I took full advantage of the stripes there on this cute airplane fabric. A little back stitch at the beginning and at the end. And I didn't even change the color of my thread. The white on top was fine, but it sinks down so much into the fleece on the bottom that you really can't tell that I sewed it with white. It gapped up just a little, but it's going to be all right for what it's going to be used for. It's a little change pad there. Now I want it to be able to roll it up so that in the bag it's not just always this big thing in the bag. It can have a little bit of order in this backpack if it's used for a little quick trip diaper bag. So I added Velcro, ribbon, and D-rings to it. So I sewed the Velcro on the soft side there onto the ribbon and mitered those corners. The corners of Velcro can be really scratchy, so I mitered them off. And then here again, I didn't measure, I just wrapped it around. But I did want it to be so that this longer piece of ribbon that wraps around wasn't annoying. So the way I'm going to sew it on there, it'll be underneath. So when it's unfolded and undo the Velcro and lay it out, the ribbon will just be underneath. There I didn't measure, but I at least folded it in half and marked it. I'll only give myself half credit for that. So pinned it on, I did center it on that side, and then I'm going to sew all the way around this piece of Velcro. This is the scratchy side. I couldn't find the kind that has both pieces in it, the loops and the hooks in the blue. But the blue's kind of fun instead of having it always be white. That's Hobby Lobby that had different colored Velcro. Back and forth twice across the end that's going to get the most pulling on it, and then around on the Velcro. So that now there's a nice change pad, because sometimes it doesn't matter and sometimes it really matters and you need something to lay your baby on to change them. But it'll roll up and then wrap around. All right, done with that. Moving on, a backpack. Just a simple string backpack. I started by serging around the edges so that it wouldn't fray. Fabric was kind of interesting. I don't know that it would fray much, but it would fray some. So I serged all the way around the edges, and that's all that'll happen with the serger. And then I marked down 2 inches because I'm going to fold that diagonally so that the rope has somewhere to go. But first I'm going to put these D-rings on the bottom. A little loop hanging off the bottom probably would have been okay, but I had some D-rings. So I'm going to sew the D-rings onto the bottom of the backpack where something could be hooked on there. This is a piece of denim from an old pair of blue jeans, and I'm going to use it on the inside to help reinforce this fabric in case anything heavy ever got put on there. I'm sewing the ribbon just like laying out flat, where I just stick it one way, fold the other way, but then I folded it over and make a little square so that the salvage edges are trapped inside. And I have to tell you that when I was done, I did go back and add another piece of ribbon next to that because those D-rings were wide enough that I thought they needed a little bit wider ribbon. And then I cut away all the extra denim that I didn't need so that it just has a little dot in the bottom. But that gives it a little more strength to put stuff in and have a weight pulling on it without risking pulling it through. Now, the 2 pieces of rope that are 36-ish inches long. They need to be long enough to go up the side and all the way across to the other side, or all the way around. If you had one piece that went all the way around all 4 sides when it's folded in half, that's how long it would be. Anyway, they're trapped in at the bottom with a knot in them so they can't pull through, and then I sewed up to where I had marked it 2 inches. And so they're just big loops inside of the backpack now, but sewed at the bottom. And then I put a little loop at the top so that this can be hung up. That can be helpful if you have a little, you come in the house and you have a little hook somewhere you can stick it on. This will give you a way to hang it up without this. The drawstrings are great, but they're hard to hang it up by because they pull so funny. But so I sewed that in the middle of one side on the top with knots at the end of it. This is paracord, and I don't know if it would pull through or not, but I didn't want to. So now I'm going to fold those top edges of the seam that had that 2-inch gap at the top, fold them down so that they're a little bit opening. So I have an opening for the rope to go through. And I am sewing way out at the edge, and so that seam does taper as that fabric gets wider and more narrow toward the seam allowance. But sew both of those, and then just like that, I will be ready to deal with the rope. Turn it right side out. And the rope is weird because now I have these 2 long loops hanging off of each corner. But how to make them work for this drawstring backpack. So I'm going to go up and across one side. So I got the rope from one side of the bag, and I'm going to go up and across the top, one top edge. I'm not trying to pin it all at the same time. And then from the other side, I'm going to get one piece of the rope and go across the top on the same side, so that these 2 pieces of rope, one from each of the bottom corners, is inside of this seam allowance. So they're kind of everywhere, it feels like, but the 2 of them come up and go across, and they oppose each other. So once I get that straightened out, I'm going to pin that, and there will be 2 pieces of rope inside of that casing. So I didn't make the casing in advance of the rope and try to fish the rope through there. I just made the casing with the rope already in it, because you want a casing that's a little bit big on the rope so that it slides easy. If it was really tight against the rope, it wouldn't slide as easy, so it's bigger than it needs to be. So that has both ropes, one from each side at the bottom, going through it, and then sew across to make this casing to hold them in place. When I get to that rope there in the middle that's for a hook, I do backstitch a little bit across that. At least I think I do. Oh my goodness! Don't tell Sarah I didn't backstitch on it. I did backstitch when I sewed them on to begin with, but there, and a little backstitch at the far end. Alright, so that is half of it. But now we have to make the casing on the other side and catch the rope in it. So, see there's an X there, and they each go through opposite each other. And now I'm going to take that X and pull it up so that they make an L across the top, and catch them on that other side, fold them over, and have a casing. So there's like a loop on each end where we made the V, and 2 ropes through each casing side at the top. And that to me is easier than trying to figure out how to sew them later, to just go ahead and have them sewn in and make them as a part of it all along. And there it is. A simple little string backpack diaper bag. Okay, thanks for watching. I hope it's not too confusing. It is a little weird how to get the strings to go in the right place, but I think it makes it easier than trying to fish them through there. Anyway, I hope it was helpful to you. Remember, let your light shine before men, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. See you next time.